Welcome to the official podcast of the Journal of Science Policy and Governance. In this podcast, students and early career researchers share more about their publication in the journal. Join us weekly to hear from the next generation of STEM leaders as we elevate their voices in science, technology, and innovation policy. Hello, and welcome to SciPol SoundBites, a podcast of the Journal of Science Policy and Governance. I'm Adriana Bankston, JSPG's Chief Outreach Officer, and your host for this podcast. Let's dive in. JSPG recently published a special topics issue on the impacts of emerging technologies on inequality and sustainability in collaboration with the United Nations Major Group for Children and Youth. Today, we're joined by an author from said issue, Morgan Livingston. Morgan is a senior at the University of California, Berkeley, studying technology policy and data science. She's a research assistant with the Wilson Center's Science, Technology, and Innovation program, and also assists research on digital privacy at Stanford's Law Center for Internet and Society. Morgan is the author of a new policy memo published in JSPG entitled Preventing Racial Bias in Federal AI. Morgan, thanks for being on the show.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Of course. So let's start by just hearing a little bit about your publication. If you can give us one simple 1-minute overview.
Yeah, so in my policy memo, I propose ways to safeguard against racial bias in AI used by US federal agencies. Right now, out of 142 of the largest federal agencies, 45% use or have considered using AI. And this is for tasks ranging from setting bail to even detecting financial fraud. The problem is that there's yet to be a standardized method to assess AI tools. And we also have a lack of diversity in AI technologists. This means that the people impacted by the technology are not represented in its design or governance. In the memo, I focus on the need to prevent racial bias, and I outline the ways that systemic inequalities can be encoded into AI, then amplified through the technology's use. I propose that federal agencies first establish standardized impact assessments for AI, and then a diversity initiative for AI technologists. And I propose that agencies operationalize a human-in-the-loop methodology to ensure staff engagement and monitoring with AI.
Thank you. Yeah, that's really important work. So I'm curious, what was your motivation for doing this kind of work?
So first, I wanted to raise awareness on the interaction of technology with systemic inequalities. I think there is often an idea that technology is a neutral tool, a neutral and objective tool, but that is simply not true. So I wanted to first raise awareness and then call for government action. We've already seen cases where the lack of technology assessment has resulted in discriminant harm. For example, not only has there been, I think, more widely publicized racial disparities in criminal sentencing algorithms, but even algorithms used for healthcare, where one AI tool used for 200 million people prevented almost 30% of eligible Black patients from receiving additional care. Now, with federal agencies adopting AI technologies, it's increasingly important that we take steps to not only safeguard against error, but to make sure that the benefits of the technology are equally distributed.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. It's really interesting the way you approach this work. I wanted to speak specifically to our audience, who is made up of students, early career researchers, and young professionals themselves, who would like to get an idea of what it takes to do this kind of work.
So most helpful for me was actually having an interdisciplinary background. Now, while my education is more technical, so incorporating a lot of computer science and data science courses, I also have a background working in city and congressional offices. This was incredibly helpful when analyzing the decision points for technology adoption, specifically the significance of seemingly mundane procurement processes. It was also helpful in analyzing feasibility of proposals. For example, looking at how existing processes, like processes in place for privacy impact assessments, could be leveraged to introduce assessments for new technologies like AI. So combining kind of this practical analysis of government functioning with the technical understanding was incredibly helpful for first being able to diagnose the problem. So, being able to look at the more technical academic articles, but then applying those to kind of my lived experience in government positions where a lot of the decision-making happens in seemingly mundane procurement processes, or how you craft a request for proposals.
Yeah, thank you for that. You have a really interesting background, and also I wouldn't think that procurement is something that is really exciting, but you're making it sound exciting. So along those lines, can you tell us what was the most exciting part of this work for you and also the most challenging?
Okay, I will start with most challenging. That was translating the language. So translating between the academic, sometimes jargon, and the language that could be used to communicate the implications and action steps needed for policy. So for example, just the word bias means something very difficult, means something very different in the statistical versus the societal sense. And so something that I personally struggled with was figuring out how to reconcile those. And sometimes that meant making judgment calls that went against my academic training. And I would say actually most helpful in that was talking with friends and family who were completely outside of the academic setting and who could read what I wrote and say, yeah, I still don't get what AI means, and help me just cut through the jargon. Now, I'd say the most exciting was the chance to talk about inclusion and specifically the distribution of benefits of AI. I am active in the women in tech space, and I was excited to be able to write about partially some of my own experiences. So being able to look at those times when I realized, this technology was not made for me, or even interacting with government systems that use technology, and reflecting on my own experience and realizing that, again, this technology was not designed for all of the people that it would end up impacting. So being able to kind of reflect on those and apply it more broadly to look at adoption of technology in the government setting.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's exciting. And yeah, I can relate to your comment about explaining AI to people who are not in science. But it's exciting, but it's challenging also. But also, it can give you really good feedback, I think, from people in different backgrounds. So thank you. So you kind of started touching on this. The broader implications of your work, and also thinking specifically about underrepresented groups. Can you tell us a little bit about that aspect of your work?
Yes. Now, I think there is sometimes a tendency with AI to head towards the doom and gloom scenario. But I want to reframe that a little bit, because the beauty of AI being an emerging technology is that it means we have the opportunity to shape its direction. But This means that we have to ensure that stakeholders are included in the development and that there's robust assessment, or else what we will see is technology that actually exacerbates social inequalities. So you can see that where AI picks up on the inequalities in data and then learns to replicate those in predictions made about the future. And then we as humans acting on that just continue reinforcing systemic inequalities. Now, that would be a little bit of the doom and gloom, but the hope is that if we take active measures now, we can combat that. And I think the government has a very large role in that, and partially through the mundane impact assessments and procurement processes, because companies looking to design tools and vying for government contracts, if they know that there will be specific standards that will have to be met, that their code will have to be audited, that the data will be looked at to ensure either racial, gender, or different forms of fairness, then the tools will start to be designed in ways that match our values. So I think there is risk that the technology can continue to widen social inequalities, but I think there is also hope that we can build more inclusion into the development process and actually really realize the benefits of AI.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah, I think it's really important to consider the effects of AI on different groups and the inequalities that it can lead to, but also how we can make it more equitable overall. So that's really important. So I want to ask you also sort of what's the next step for you after your work is published? What is your insight into what happens afterwards?
Yeah. So I mean, right now I'm really trying to raise awareness on the interaction of AI with social inequalities and emphasize the role of government to guide the technology's impact. And I am so incredibly grateful to JSPG for not only their help and support with the publication, but also with taking the ideas forward. So this publication led into a wonderful opportunity to collaborate with the CDC on developing ethics training materials for AI in public health. And this week, I'm participating as a youth representative with the UN Major Group on Children and Youth to a UN expert group meeting on digital technologies. And so I personally, I was not expecting to be able to kind of take an idea that was, kind of formed in my classes, engaging with research groups, take that and bring it to publication, and then actually be able to bring it out further into the world and act on it. But I'm very excited to be doing that right now. And I really hope that young researchers also take the opportunity to publish and put their ideas out there.
Yeah, that's really great to hear. We're really happy for your article, and it's great to hear what else you've been able to do as a result. So thank you. So last question, where can people find you online? LinkedIn, Twitter, what would you prefer for people to find you?
I am on LinkedIn. Search Morgan Livingston. I'm also available by email, and my email is mlivingston@berkeley.edu.
Thank you. Thank you, Morgan. And thank you, everybody, for joining us today. You can find this episode and others like it on JSPG's YouTube channel and on SoundCloud. And that's it for this week's SciPol SoundBites, the podcast of the Journal of Science, Policy, and Governance. If you enjoy this episode, subscribe to our podcast on YouTube and SoundCloud. You can also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at SciPol Journal.